You're watching World Talks on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. There's been much talk about Baltic security, keeping the likes of Estonia, Lithuania and Latvia safe in the event of a Kremlin attack. But further north, Finland, which boasts the longest NATO border with Russia, is also ramping up preparations alongside its Nordic partners. The next move, a push towards a new unified Scandinavian air force by 2030. Here to break it all down is Eoin McNamara, Research Fellow at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Great to be on once again.
A pleasure to have you on. Now, talk me through this new joint operation and how crucial could air defences be in any potential conflict with Russia?
Well, I think it's very simple. I mean, by 2030, you're looking at much stronger Nordic cooperation of its fighter fleet. I mean, of course, Sweden uses the Griffin, and the other Nordic nations, apart from Iceland, which doesn't have an air force, the other Nordic nations, Norway, Denmark, and Finland, they will all be using the F-35 in full very soon. So we're looking at a fleet, essentially, of 200 aircraft, quite formidable, under close coordination between these Nordic countries. I think the question remains open now at what sort of command and control is there going to be and how this is going to be integrated. That remains to be seen and remains to be discussed, and the technical details need to be ironed out. And of course, vis-a-vis deterrence and defense from the Russian threat, of course, air power, these fighter aircraft are far more sophisticated than anything Russia has currently, and probably anything Russia will have in the future. So it is an advantage that these Nordic states are honing.
Politically, is this also designed to send a message to Moscow to say, don't mess with us, we are a united front, at least in the north?
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, Nordic states, Nordefco, Nordic defense cooperation has been going since the early 2000s. There's been other political and economic cooperation going on between the Nordic countries long before that. There's a strong mutual trust between the Nordic nations, and there's a strong emphasis on self-reliance within the region. You look after your own independent defense posture first, and then you look to partner strongly. So all of this most definitely is signaling a very strong message towards Moscow that these states might be small, but they'll pack a punch, and they will have formidable capabilities that will be operating at their optimum.
And a couple of months ago, I was in Finland, and that was really the sentiment. It was kind of a three-pronged approach if Russia were to try to come across the border. First of all, their own reliance and their own ability to defend themselves, then maybe the allies, and then NATO. When we talk about NATO Article 5, I mean, Finland is saying, look, we will try our best to protect ourselves, and same for the Nordics. Finland's defence minister, as part of this announcement, noted that all the Nordic countries will, as part of this fleet, have more than 200 new generation fighters by the beginning of the next decade. I'm interested in your view on this because given we've heard time and time again about some kind of incursion into NATO territory being possible before then, is this 2030 deadline too late?
Well, of course, before then, all of these countries independently have very strong air forces, and there are mechanisms already in place for these through NATO and through different regional arrangements that have been honed through many exercises over recent years. There are many mechanisms still in place through allied defense. Already by then. We're just looking at things getting stronger and stronger, and things, these things takes time. I mean, a lot of these initiatives that we're talking about right now haven't really been tried before, a kind of a combined or an integrated air force among 4 or 5 countries. So they take some time to bed in and to mature and to become effective. But the arrangements currently are already quite strong. So these gaps can be bridged, but the signal is that things are getting stronger still, and I think that's very important.
Well, that was going to be my next question, because you mentioned the likes of Nordefco. I mean, is it fair to say that we're seeing closer cooperation between these countries in the north, also obviously along NATO's eastern flank too, but this idea that with Russia's threats, Washington putting more of the ball in Europe's court, that we are seeing these countries trying to take their future even more into their own hands. Would that be your observation?
Yes, most definitely. And I mean, there's always a strong degree of trust between the Nordic states. They're always very like-minded states, very similar politics, very similar economic structure, very similar social system. So they know exactly what makes the other tick. And that's very, very importantly, culturally, in terms of the strategic culture. What's also very important to note here, too, is the emphasis on security of supply and independence and sovereignty. Even though there's cooperation going on, you don't beggar the neighbor, or you don't take advantage of your neighbor. You look after your own house first, and you look to partner so that things become even stronger. And I mean, when we think of the Trump administration, some of the risks around the F-35 program, Finland was very, very astute in that regard when it procured the F-35 a number of years ago, that it got a deal that really made it very sovereign in terms of its options, with the technical tail and the resupply and the upgrades for the F-35. They drove a very good deal with Lockheed Martin. It was a $9.4 billion procurement. I think it was announced in late 2021. So sovereignty is key here, independence is key, and each unit in the system being very strong before you look to partner, so that things become very strong, or things become even stronger. And I think that's a recipe for the rest of the NATO alliance as well. If NATO is to get stronger over time, with the Americans doing less in Europe.
Of course, there is that issue of the NATO buzzword, if you like, military mobility. A big part of any alliance-wide response to the Kremlin will be getting those troops, or indeed equipment, to the front line, right? I mean, do you think that the military mobility is up to scratch right now when it comes to NATO's eastern and northern flank?
Yeah, well, it's come a long way, and I've done some research on this. I mean, there was a lot of red tape, a lot of bureaucracy. It took a long time to move convoys of military equipment and troops between countries, even for exercises, you know. So it leaves you wondering, leaves you want to question what would things be like for real if we were in an emergency situation. And I'm not talking about the Nordic countries per se in this regard. They've been ahead of the curve. I'm talking about the NATO alliance as a whole. So getting things moving in this regard is vital, because if the security situation deteriorates further, we need military units moving in large numbers very quickly, with their technical tails, with their logistical supplies, with their medical units, with their food, with their fuel, with their ammunition. And we need them traveling to places. Could be along the Polish border, the Baltic border, or it could be the new NATO Forward Land Forces battle group that's going to be installed in the far north of Finland under Swedish leadership, as NATO and its Forward Land Forces enlarge across the eastern and northern flanks. So in this regard, military mobility is key, and it needs to be honed further and further, because it is the lifeblood of our deterrence in Europe.
And what about this Rail Baltica line that is meant to connect Finland, Estonia, Warsaw? I spoke to Estonia's economy minister just this week, who insisted to me that it will be up and running by 2030, again, that 2030 deadline. Are you confident that that will be met? And talk to me about how much of a difference you expect this connection to actually make.
Well, of course, it will connect Finland and Estonia by the ferry link. But of course, it will link Tallinn with Warsaw, and it will really speed up that very, very important link, and it'll be a very important piece of infrastructure in the region. I mean, telling the truth, I followed this project for many years, going back 10 or 15 years, I'm an Irishman, but I moved to the Baltic states around that time. And it's been bedeviled by political wrangling and different regulatory problems and debates between the Baltic states and the funders in Brussels, and different national interests getting in the way. So we need to get over these problems. There's far larger problems at stake, and we need to cooperate. And it will be a very important piece of infrastructure, primarily for the civilian economy and for civilian connectivity in the region. That's primary. But also in an emergency situation, in a contingency, it can also be vital for military mobilization. And as I said, that's the baseline. That's the lifeblood of the deterrence system that we have implemented for this region currently.
So do you expect trains to be running 2030 between Warsaw, Tallinn and into Finland? Because that's what the Estonian economy minister insisted to me this week.
I hope he's right. I believe his intentions are sincere. If I was a betting man, I wouldn't rule out any hiccups, but I hope the geopolitical situation, the security situation, provides greater impetus so that we do indeed meet that 2030 target. Because the benefits are innumerable, and I think countries in the region, they need to put a lot of their national wrangling aside and focus on cooperation for the greater good.
Eoin McNamara, always a pleasure. Research Fellow at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
And that's all for this edition of World Talks here on TVP World. Do stay with us for more. I'm Aaron Darman. Goodbye for now.